Welcome back to another Xiao tutorial. In today's episode, I will be teaching you how to read Jian Pu, or the simplified notation system. This will allow you to read music and get started playing new songs on the Xiao. Today, Jian Pu is the most commonly used form of musical notation throughout China. And it's not only used for the Xiao, it's used for all instruments. So your wind instruments, your string instruments, even for singing, Jian Pu will be used to accompany the lyrics of a song as well. And that is because at its most fundamental level, Jian Pu is a numbered substitution for the major scale. And so you have your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, and do will become 1, re will become 2, mi will become 3, and so on. Now you have a system that is very easily applied to any instrument, any musical piece, and it has a very low learning curve. It's very visual, it's very easy to understand, right? Even for Chinese history in music, it's very common that instruments have developed their own language, where you have some kind of representative character or notation that stands in for, the technique, the sound that you're looking to produce. Even instruments like the guqin still use this notation today. So having this representative kind of substituting language for a musical notation is very common in China, and it fits very well with the musical world. However, Jian Pu, because of its universal nature and its simplified text, it has become the norm for almost every instrument in China. So how do we actually read Jian Pu? If you have a piece of Jian Pu notation in front of you, you'll notice all the standard information at the top. The name of the song, the composer, the phrasing, typically 4/4, so you know how many beats are in each section, as well as the tempo or the speed, the BPM, the beats per minute will be listed. But you'll also have something that says 1 equals a letter, okay? Typically, you'll find G and F is the most common, but all that means is your key of Xiao that you are currently using. Now, 1 equals do, which will equal the center note on the flute. That's a little bit strange for Xiao. You would imagine the lowest note being number 1 and leading up from there. But we're central note specific. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover the back hole and the first 3 on the front with the top hand. Now that note, if you notice, the next one open will have an inscription next to it of what key of Xiao that you have, if it's a G or an F or what have you. So that is actually going to be the key that we're playing in right now, this do, okay? That is subject to change depending on what piece you're playing, but we're just going to talk about it as if we have standard tuning, okay? So with standard tuning, if this is 1, then actually when we go down a lower note than that, we're going back down through the numbers into 7, 6, 5. So the lowest note in standard tuning will be a low scale 5 or so, okay? Then every time we lift a finger, we actually go up 1 whole note, remembering those home base positions from last episode, okay? So we have so, number 5 on the low, then we have la, we have 6, then we have shi, 7. Okay, now we actually get to the middle scale, the middle register. So we start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we go back through, okay? Now, how we distinguish this on the notation is with a dot. So low scale, there's only 3 of them. They will have a dot underneath the number. So 5, 6, and 7 will be listed with a dot underneath. Now, when you get to the middle scale, once you get to that do, now there is no dot. So it is just the plain number. That is kind of like your standard home, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, no dot, okay? Then when we get to the high scale, now the dot will be above. So now we know what pitch we're playing in. We also know the register, okay? So that's kind of your standard need to know right off the bat. You can kind of gauge a song by looking through it and seeing, what is your range. In the beginning, it's pretty hard to play some of the high register notes. So you can kind of look at a piece, and if you see a lot of high notes, you know that, okay, maybe this is a little more complicated, and you should stick to something more in the mid and low range in the beginning, okay? Otherwise, the next most important thing to pick up on is the rhythm. Now the rhythm is also really, really standard. Basically, anything that is a whole beat, anything that is a standard 1 and, right? So if we have 4 beats, we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and anything that is a whole note is just the number alone by itself. The only special thing to be aware of here is that if we add an extra half beat to a note, we put a dot next to it. So dot underneath low register, dot above middle register, but the dot in the middle next to the note actually means add a half beat. Okay? So that's the only little special notation you need to be aware of here. Now when we have half notes, we underline them one time. So that would be, for example, do, do, re, re, mi, mi. Each one of those would be a half note. Okay? Then we split them in half and we re-articulate. And every time we underline a note, we split its value in half again. So if it's underlined once, it's a half note. If it's underlined twice, it's a quarter note. If it's underlined 3 times, it's an eighth note, and so on. Okay? So you can get pretty descriptive with that. Once it gets so small, of course, then it becomes an ornamentation, and the notation does shift from there. But generally, in the beginning, the most important things to pay attention to are the pitch, the register, and the rhythm. If you can understand these 3 pieces, you can pretty much play all music. You just ignore the ornamentation, okay? A few other things to know, some specialties, are if you see a 0, that is a rest. So that is a pause in sound. If you see a V listed kind of above a notation, that is where you take a breath. Because it is a wind instrument, sometimes that will be specified. Other times it won't be, and you can be a little bit free to choose where you breathe, or you can listen to the music and kind of gauge where it's the most appropriate. The other thing would be your sustains. So sustains will be dashes. So you might have a number followed by a couple, 1, 4, 8 dashes, and that is how many beats you maintain that note without changing it, re-articulating it, or adding anything to it, okay? Otherwise, you have slurs where things are combined together. That's kind of similar to a sustain. It's just a different way of writing it that's a little bit more clear, especially when you're combining separate phrases together. That will be pretty much everything you need to know to get the basic structure of any musical piece. From there are a bunch of other ornaments and dynamics that we can add to it. We have things like vibrato, glissando, trill, hitting, and lifting. You have dynamics like piano and forte that might be listed. Different things like this that go into, but we'll talk about that in later episodes. For now, if you can pay attention to the pitch, the register, the rhythm, and some of those basic dynamics like sustain, pause, slur, and taking breath, that is enough to know everything you need to know to play the song at its basic core. I would suggest waiting to add on those embellishments, those ornaments, all those grace notes. That's something that I'm going to be introducing in future videos, and it pays to kind of get the foundation of each song before you start adding those extras into it, those flares, okay? I actually created a basic series called the Xiao Basic Series that takes you through a steady progression of easy to more advanced songs, and it gets more complicated in progression, rhythm, introducing ornaments along the way. And I would suggest going through that. I think I created like a good system for you to progress at a steady rate. So I highly suggest that. I hope that is a very good resource for you to use. But for now, if you find any song that you're interested in, give it a shot and pay attention to the basic structure first, and then later you can add your own flavor to it. So keep practicing, and we'll catch you next week.